everybody, as I am now in my 17th year of making hundreds of YouTube videos and having watched thousands more, I feel like I've drawn some conclusions about woodworking, and I feel like I'm just now sort of starting to figure out what it all means. I've definitely come to believe that woodworking is far more meaningful and more compelling when you can look beyond the tools, the skills, the techniques, even beyond the project itself. I discussed this in my September newsletter last year, and I thought I would adapt it for this video because when I was a kid, I don't think I ever used the term woodworking. I just made things. I remember there was a while when I was real young, I was really into making laser pistols and guns out of like found tree branches, and I would wrap wires around them and put nails in it and stuff. And I remember making ashtrays. You don't see those anymore, out of clay, and those were kind of fun, even though I was not a heavy smoker at age 7 or 8. Oh, you know what I also made was, remember those cans of soda and beer back before they had the kind of pop tops they have now, where you had to peel the thing off? It was a long time ago. But anyways, you could save those things and you could bend them together, and so I did that. I saved like thousands of these, I don't know, I made a curtain out of them. I felt just like Greg Brady with like a beaded curtain for my room. And I didn't have an early memory of making a bloody Halloween mask, of course, out of a grocery bag and paper mache. I even made some like really ephemeral art, I guess we would call it now. It was like sculpture out of rocks and glue. It was ephemeral because it didn't stick together. But it was all just simply a desire to create, probably more related to creating art. I didn't consider making anything conventionally useful. So when people ask me how long I've been woodworking, it's really hard for me to say, because I was certainly using scrap lumber and pieces of plywood to make random things long before I had any idea of proper building materials. It was all very natural. The word woodworking comes with way more fussiness than it should. Perhaps, maybe wood playing is a word that needs to exist. I had been making crude boxes and stuff from scrap lumber, a hammer and nails, and a coping saw in my grandfather's garage long before I knew the concept of joinery. I really thought that the only way to connect boards together was to use nails. I was aware that screws existed, but they seemed very adult and kind of way out of my league. I never considered the possibility of glue, and my grandpa didn't have any kind of clamps. It wasn't until I was around 12 or 13 that my dad bought a Shopsmith. It's one of these multi-tools, and that's when I began to use power tools and a table saw with any regularity. And that was when I started to understand the word woodworking. It wasn't until I was in my teens that I learned that joinery was a thing, only because I started watching the New Yankee Workshop and the Woodwright Shop on TV. The idea began to work its way into my head that proper woodworking was defined and accomplished by means of technique and tools. I didn't have any of Norm Abrams' state-of-the-art power tools, nor did I have Roy Underhill's experience or just the complete audacity to shape wood with an adze or an axe or whatever other crazy ass tools he used. So I shamefully stuck with my crude building techniques, thinking that they were wrong. When I was in my early 20s and living in an apartment in San Francisco, I only had a few handheld power tools that I acquired from my days of doing maintenance work for a chain of movie theaters. A lot of you already know that that was the apartment where I built furniture on the rooftop with a long extension cord running down into my kitchen. I always like telling that story as a little bit of inspiration that you can do woodworking anywhere, but you know, at the time, I didn't even think about what I was doing was woodworking. I was just a broke, struggling photographer who could have bought secondhand furniture cheaper, but I just felt the need to make things. I used the tools that I had. I used a jigsaw, circular saw, and a drill. I didn't even have a power sander. I hand sanded everything with sheets of sandpaper. I butt jointed boards together and I used screws. I felt like I was a real adult now using screws, and I used metal L brackets for added support. I bought and glued into place this like pre-made quarter rounds and other molding strips to add a little bit of flair, and I finished everything with stain and polyurethane. These were sturdy, functional cabinets and furniture pieces that provided years of service. I thought they looked great, plus they were very satisfying to make. They met every requirement without the use of rabbet joints, dovetail joints, mortise and tenons, dados, butt joints with mechanical fasteners. Okay, so now let's jump ahead to when I bought a house in my early 30s and having an actual garage for the first time that I could use as a workshop. I was still very much afflicted by the teachings of Norm Abram and his use of power tools. Looking back on it now, his style of woodworking feels very prescriptive. But it seems like I had spent most of my life dreaming of the day when I could do some real woodworking, and this was finally my opportunity. I was convinced that woodworking was a magical word unlocked by having specific space, owning certain tools, and using prescribed techniques. It never occurred to me that I had been doing real woodworking most of my life. So a table saw was one of my first purchases. I bought into all of the hype. Okay, I still do. I soon followed that up with a whole bunch of other tools, including a miter saw, a joiner, a planer, a router table, a biscuit joiner, clamps, sanders of all types, gadgets, gizmos, etc., etc., etc. Finally, I felt like I could call myself a woodworker. Almost. Because you see, I still hadn't made any proper joints, and all the knowledge I'd been soaking up from books and magazines and TV shows made it pretty clear that a butt joint was the weakest, most amateurish, most pathetic joint you could possibly make. And sadly, despite my real-world success at butt joint rooftop woodworking, if an article by some random dude in a magazine implied that my experience was frowned upon by the Woodworking Boys Club, I took it to heart. Not only that, but I inferred that arbitrary tools and techniques only made you a regular woodworker. The real goal was to become a fine woodworker. I felt like there was a litmus test. To enter the finely kept fine woodworking gate, you had to make dovetail joints. I didn't know why then, and I still don't know why now. So what did I do? I spent $200 on a dovetail jig for my router. It was ridiculously fussy and time-consuming to set up, and I used it for 2 projects. And the dovetail joints looked okay, I guess. But I didn't feel like I was any different, other than now this was something like a feature on the project that I had to point out to people. So then I thought, well, maybe the real test is to make dovetail joints by hand. So I bought a dovetail saw and chisels and tried making hand-cut dovetails. They looked pretty much like crap. I practiced for a week and improved a little, but I didn't feel any joy. If anything, they just seemed tedious and frustrating. Was real woodworking supposed to be like this? Look, I understand that everybody's experience is going to be different, but after years of actually building things, I've concluded that 4 joinery methods are strong, easy to use, and as you probably already know, define the entire style of woodworking for mere mortals. Woodworking. Number 1, rabbets, or if you're in the UK, you probably call them rebates. Those are for joining sides of boxes or casework at 90-degree angles. They keep the edges in alignment, they're self-squaring, and they provide a lot of surface area for glue. 2, dados, for joining the edge of one board perpendicular to the face of another board, such as bookshelves. Basically, they're rabbets that aren't on the edge. 3, butt joints. Yeah, I said it, butt joints. For larger sized construction, There's nothing wrong with these. You can screw the edge of one board into the end grain of another with really long screws, and it works great. I built my workbenches like this, and they're rock solid. They've lasted for years. But for smaller projects, I usually go with rabbets. And 4, pocket hole joinery. My pocket hole jig is one of my most used tools. Pocket screws and those kind of modern jigs that simplify using them have fundamentally made woodworking more accessible to more people than ever before. The joints are stronger than butt joints and they're easy to make. So what's going on here? What's the deal with joinery techniques and why are so many woodworkers obsessed, stressed, and confused by them? Do you need to learn and become proficient at making dovetail joints, bridle joints, box joints, tongue and groove joints, or mortises? I mean, if you enjoy the challenge and gain satisfaction from crafting a perfect dovetail, then of course, by all means, pursue it. I'm all about embracing the experience of making things in whatever way is personally fulfilling. I have friends who love to constantly practice and refine their hand-cut dovetails, while other people I know enjoy cutting absolutely weird, bonkers joints using a CNC. Strength seems to be the most common reason cited for using any particular type of woodworking joint. For sure, a mortise and tenon is one of the absolute strongest ways you can join boards together. People often feel dovetails are needed in drawer construction because they believe opening and closing a drawer puts a lot of stress on its construction, and any other type of joint will probably fail. So how much strength does a project need? There's a point of diminishing returns. Say like a bedroom nightstand drawer might only get opened once a day and only be seen by one person. I have rough and tumble shop drawers that I open and close all the time that are made with rabbet joints. They're just as strong now as when I made them years ago. They're simple to make and they're sturdy enough. And I feel like a lot of woodworkers place the longevity of a project above all other concerns. Look, any project only needs to be as strong as its realistic usage demands. Again, if you want to assemble drawers using dovetails, great. Just don't be under the illusion that they're necessary. Or think about it this way. Would you prefer a drawer to reasonably last 40 years or 45 years before needing repair? Is that tiny bit of potential longevity worth the upfront cost of time and effort? This isn't a question with a right or wrong answer, by the way, but an honest question worth asking yourself. What about a coffee table? Does it need mortise and tenon joinery to withstand years of sliding around and feet resting on it? Do you expect this to be the one and only coffee table you're going to use for the rest of your life? Do your tastes ever change? Is there a possibility that you might want to make a different coffee table at some point in your life? Are you cool with building something that'll only last 60 years? Or do you want heirloom furniture to hand down to your kids and grandkids? And then the question becomes, will it even fit their decor, or will this thing you made just become a burden on them that they have to carry around from house to house for their whole life? Will they appreciate the time that you spent on that joinery? That last question is a big one. In general, most people don't notice or even care about the type of joinery used in furniture construction. Although I do see this made with dovetail joints as sort of a marketing bullet these days on furniture that's like made out of MDF. So anyways, as a rule, any joinery you use on a piece of furniture will need to be pointed out to people who will probably politely nod and they'll say, well, that's very nice, without really comprehending the amount of toil that went into their creation. And maybe it's just all the effort we put into making something that we need people to appreciate. I find that mostly woodworkers like to flex their joinery with other woodworkers. Have you seen any of those kind of viral videos on Instagram of these, like, usually they're like Southeast Asian guys who are just hand cutting these really mind-boggling complex joints? I mean, they're amazing to watch, but I assure you They're only showing you samples of 2 boards going together. It's highly unlikely that they're building furniture this way, especially professionally. As usual, the product is not the woodworking, it's the video. Aside from all of that, this is just a reminder that your creativity and joy should never be defined by others. Honestly, it probably doesn't even need to be defined at all, even though I now have somewhat better tools and a lot more experience than I used to have. It took me years to learn that what I'm creating now isn't fundamentally different from the things I made when I was a kid or when I was working on a rooftop. I'm just making things. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please leave a comment and let me know what your thoughts on any or all of this are. And by the way, don't forget to sign up for my newsletter. It comes out the first Friday of every month, and it's called Notes from the Shop. Although to sign up, you have to go to notesfromsteve.com because it's a little questionable about what the name of this newsletter is. I don't know. But it's been going on for over 5 years now, and I think you'll enjoy it. Thanks for watching, everybody.